There's long been rumors as to how exactly rainbows are made in Equestria. While a great amount of Pegasi ponies are employed in the rainbow department of the weather factory, almost all of them do the low wind work. What's known as that great streams of spectra, the individual colors of the rainbow, flow through large grates and into vast vats, from where the workers carefully and equally mix the spectra into calculated rainbow pools that dot and run through the factory and surrounding city. Next, the mixture is pumped to the floor below, where other employees automate it and store it until the active weather Pegasi deploy it in the field. However, no one knows how individual spectra is made. Supplies are never seen being brought in, leaving even not the slightest clue of what goes into a rainbow tour. Tourists, when visiting the factory, are treated to an extremely forbidden and plain wall, with massive solid doors barring entry to any pony at any time. While most of the facility's various signs and arteries is bubbly and welcoming, the Rainbow Factory's upper floor was protected by harsh imagery of potential hazards and death, and the cloud wall was made not out of the clean white of the rest of the city, but out of black, quietly thundering fog. To become an employee of the Upper Rainbow Factory meant sacrificing any life outside those black walls. Workers are sworn to secrecy and forbidden from leaving and live inside the facility itself. Those who managed to make it out, not in a body bag, were twisted and disturbed, too damaged to even bring themselves to talk about it. A lot of theories were proposed. Dark magic from captured unicorns, chemicals, and environmental hazards that no sane pony would tolerate, and even thoughts of another unknown sister of Celestia's, destined to create the spectra instead of raising the sun or moon. None of them could be farther from the truth. "Come on, Orion, we're going to be late for our final test," scootalu called to a friend of hers. She was older now, and in her last year of flight school. She, like all other Pegasus in the school, were terribly nervous about the final test. Those that passed were granted freedom into the world to find their cutie marks, if haven't yet, and become worker ponies. Little is known, or at least a little thought about, fact of what happened to the fillies that failed their test. While uncommon, one or two from every class generally didn't have it in them to perform the vigorous acts or maneuvers. Those that failed their test were looked down upon in the worst of ways, shunned and hated. Cloudsdale had always bred a form of nationalism amongst its occupants. If you weren't the best or didn't show the potential of being the greatest, you weren't allowed to be part of the glorious collective. Scootalu moved a little to the side as Orion, a tall yet fairly skinny pony, settled next to her. He fluffed his light brown feathers and gave a worried attempt at a smile. And as he stared around where he sat, there were sitting in a large open waiting room overlooking the Colosseum, with the other graduating Pegasi just visible in the distance, was the factory. Orion glanced at it and gulped. "What's the matter, Orion? You afraid of getting a dead-end job on the snow line?" Orion chuckled a bit, then closed his eyes and sighed. "No, it's just, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. What if I fail? What if I don't fail, but do bad enough, just bad enough to still be disliked by everyone? I don't know if I could take being deported. Where do we even go anyways?" Scootalu gave Orion a friendly punch. "No one knows you don't. And we're not going to fail. Everyone here is going to be fine. I know I will at least pass," she laughed. "Thanks to the tip from Rainbow Dash, I'm sure to be fine." "Oh yeah, that reassures me. That's actually just as, if not even more reassuring than the psychopathic hate everyone here seems to love to spread." Quit panicking, scaredy wings, Scootalu replied. The only one here I think might fail is that yellow pony with the dark green mane. She's the one who was out sick for that month, you know? Oh yeah, Orian remembered as he craned his neck in the other pony's direction. The one that had the bad case of a hoof and wing? She looks pretty confident though. I suppose we'll see, Scootalu trailed, turning to look at the factory herself. It gave her chills. Not of fear, but pride. I hope I get some cool active weather job. Can you imagine everyone in Ponyville or Philadelphia staring up at me, going, there goes Scootalu, such an amazing flyer. And from Cloudsdale, there can be no doubt. She smiled in excitement, forgetting her attention for the moment. That would be something, I'll admit it. Mind you, just coming from Cloudsdale. Who wouldn't be in awe? Exactly. Praise the flock. Praise the flock. Places every pony. A massive buff Pegasus walked towards the entrance to the Coliseum. We're going to do this by name. Your educators are on the east side of the field. Do not, I repeat, do not fly too far west. If they lose sight of you for any reason, you'll be failed immediately. Take deep breaths, stretch your wings one last time. The test will consist of 3 sections: weather clearing, agility, and finally, recovery. Clear the clouds. Fly through the hoops, and even then fly to the marked elevation. Close your wings for at least 3 seconds. Any less and you'll fail. But keep in mind, there's no extra points for extra seconds. Finally, recover before you hit the cloud floor. Understood? Any questions? The instructor paused and carefully glanced at every single pony in the room. Everyone's eyes were completely focused on him, and none were creased with confusion. All right, Aurora Dawn, you're up first. Clear, fly, fall, complete. The yellow pony nodded and walked up quickly to the starting ramp. With purpose, she stared at the watching judges, waited for a nod from all 3, and then took off with powerful force. The ramp bounced slightly from the force of the takeoff. Every pony watched as Aurora quickly reached the starting altitude, and then began a direct and purposeful attack on the positioned clouds. With expert timing and intelligent angles, the sky was soon empty of any moisture. Scootalu and Orion watched with open mouths as they watched the first testee pull fast and tight turns, expertly shooting dead center through each and every hoop. Finally, Aurora pulled herself up to the proper altitude, hovered over, and closed her wings. The group of students gasped as she started plummeting down towards the clouds and counted breathlessly. 1, 2, 3. They sighed as they watched her wing open in the correct amount of time, collectively holding that relief. Suddenly, Aurora's wings whipped upwards, and the group of students flinched in horror as they all heard the loud hollow snap, only to be suddenly replaced by an unending piercing scream. Many, like Orion, shielded their eyes with their wings, as others, like Scootalu, could only watch, terrified as the blur of yellow, green, and red plummeted into a cloud with a dull dud. Wasting no time, the instructor walked forwards again, as the 3 judges simply pointed down and started shuffling papers around, speaking loudly as if nothing had happened. He called out again, Daisy Fields, clear, fly, fall, complete. Schooner Orion stared slack-jawed as another pony gulped, then walked forward onto the path and took off. They turned back to the tuft on the cloud where Aurora landed and stared. As the wind blew the fragments of that were up from the collision away, they saw the shivering yellow body attempt to move, only to collapse with a cry. Faraday spots, clear, fly, fall, complete. Aurora still struggled to walk, wailing with every step. Her legs weren't broken, She could use them fine, but it was obvious the pain from her wing joints and the loss of her potential life was crushing her. Scootalu felt Orion shuffle uneasily, tears welling in his eyes as a frown formed on his face. Holiday shine, clear, fly, fall, complete. No one's coming to help her, Orion seethed through closed teeth. Scootalu felt extremely sad for the yellow Pegasus herself, but couldn't see herself helping her. She would be failed, herself, and sent away, far away from Cloudsdale and any familiar place in Equestria, to a place she and any other failed students could never stain Cloudsdale's reputation. It was a terrible shame, but Scootalu couldn't fail herself. She couldn't fail her friends, and she definitely couldn't fail Rainbow Dash. Not after the care and the help she had given her Scootalu's whole life. Scootalu blinked at the tears from her eyes and forced herself to watch the competing students. One after another took off, successfully passed the test, and flew to the east gate, under the judges' spot in the stands. That's all Scootalu focused on. Pass the test, fly to the gate, live a happy life. Orion Solstice, clear, fly, fall, complete. No. What? The instructor took a step back, one leg left raised in the air. You can't just refuse your flight test. Get out there before you piss the judges off. No, don't even pretend to care about my future if you don't care about hers. Orion defiant, unsure about himself. You say you want me to get a good life, and yet you let those that suffer, that fail, suffer unbearable pain. Get the fuck onto that field before I fail you myself, the instructor shouted manically. Fine, Orion spoke sharply before walking onto the ramp. He stared at the judges, waiting for the individual nods. And the second they came, he took off. However, long before the starting altitude, he turned sharply and landed gently next to Aurora. She turned and looked at him as blood running down her forehead and sides, and tears streamed down her face. What are you doing? You'll fail like me. You'll be exiled. I'd rather be exiled from a place that treats ponies like this than to live my life while others don't live theirs. Aurora smiled, happiness briefly replacing her sadness and her black and puffy eyes, until she stumbled again and intense pain flashed across her body. Orion leaned in close, using his wing to brace the yellow pony against himself. He stared up at the judges, beaming hate in it with his vision. They stared down, unaffected, and simply pointed down, before looking back towards the ramp for the next contestant. Scootalu stood, shocked, hardly hearing her name called. She moved numbly up the ramp, never taking her eyes off her friend and the pony who sacrificed himself to help. After a brief moment, she shook her head, recovered her thoughts, and looked to the judges. Thoughts passed through her head as she watched them all nod. Oh, Celestia, what do I do? I can't let everyone I know down, but I'll never see Orion again. I suppose. I hope he knew that risk when he did that. I'm sure he's thinking the same right now. She glanced at Orion. He wasn't looking at her. She took off, heartbroken. Instinct kicked in as a familiar rush of wind cooled her and blew her thoughts away. She stopped at the right altitude and then launched again, seizing and seeing every cloud, formulating a game plan. In a matter of a couple dozen seconds, the sky was clear. She did a quick loop in mid-flight, aiming at the first hoop. With the powerful flash of her wings, she propelled forward through the first ring and the second and the third. Expertly turning and drifting, she curved in towards the second last ring. Near the bottom of the field, as she descended, she caught sight of Orion and Aurora, almost at the west gate. Now Orion turned his head and smiled weakly. Scootalu's focus shattered. Orion knew what he did. He'd cared about her. He'd miss her, and he'd never get to say goodbye. Scootalu cranked into the bottom part of the ring, falling backwards several feet and hitting the ground. With a sudden intense flash of fear, she flipped herself onto her feet and began flapping her wings, levitating off the ground. Maybe that didn't count as a failure, she thought. I can still fly. There was a distraction on the field. She spun around to the judge's 3 hooves, pointed down. Scootalu started crying. Their tears welling up and blurring her vision. This wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened. None of it. Orion should have passed his test and cheered her on from the east gate. She shouldn't have looked at him. She should have focused on flying, but there was no room for excuses. Defeated, she slowly hovered towards Orion and settled down next to him. She looked at him with purple eyes. He looked back, offering a smile. You did a great job. Scootalu dropped her head and sobbed. She then walked around Orion, lifted a wing of her own, and helped Aurora walk to the west gate. Before them stood a long, unlit hall with only a cheap sign stuck to the wall, notifying that test failures to proceed down the hall. They waited, only briefly, to gather themselves and prepare for where they would be taken, and then all stepped forward together. Against an empty carriage at the end of the lonely hall, where 3 imposing ponies leaned in a disinterested and bored pose. One of them happened to look up as the sorry-looking trio stumbled out into the open. They were at the bottom edge of the Colosseum, with the vast rolling hills and plains of Equestria visible far below. Hey, boss, we got some of them worthless Pegasus. The first one called to an even bigger pony on the other side of the carriage. I suppose it's get to work time, is it? Cool, hot shot. There may be more too. No, I was the last student to go. Scootalu spoke in sobs. Orion could only hang his head. It's... She paused and breathed deeply, determined to remain as strong as she could. It's just us 3. Aurora's wings. They're broken. She needs help. Ain't that just a crying shame? It is. What is it to us? All the better she don't come flying back to us no more. We may have failed our damn test, but that doesn't mean we're not worth keeping alive, Scootalu shouted in a flash of rage. She was determined to hold on as much dignity as she could. All right, sheesh. Hey, Patches, doctor her up before we head out. I don't want any blood on them seats. I just washed that thing. You other 2? In the car. Orion and Scootalu hopped into the carriage and got as comfortable as they could on the hard seats, but made sure to leave room for Aurora. As soon as the third of the arch ponies finished bandaging her wings, Aurora carefully stepped onto the vehicle and lay down on the bench at the back. Scootalu inched closer to her and leaned down as to talk. The doctor to the carriage slammed shut. The boss pony was inside, the back standing by the door, watching each of them. So, Scootalu began quietly, trying not to speak too loud. You're Aurora? I'm Scootalu. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting. Aurora spoke gently with sincerity in her eyes. We did our best. That's all we can say. That's all any of us can say. Who is to say the city of the deported isn't a good one anyways? The thought struck Scootalu as she considered it. No one was ever told about where the Pegasus were brought. Most ponies considered to be some odd land, like where the zebra zebras hailed from. That made Scootaloo realize something even more profound. Hey, if where we're taking is where Sakura's from, then there's gotta be a way to get back. It's not as if we're banned from Equestria. Fluttershy, an old friend of mine, she's a Pegasus who lives in Ponyville. She never passed flight school. She never took her test. They've never come and taken her away. Exactly, Aurora agreed with a nod. Orion overheard and offered his thoughts. I think the reason we're sent far away is because no pony from Cloudsville ever wants to admit some pony who failed their flight school could come from their city. What a fucking horrible place now that I think about it. I never want to go back. Maybe that's why no Pegasus ever comes back. They just don't like Cloudsville. You goddamn ponies can barely even call yourself Pegasus. Boss spoke from the door. He was swaying ever so slightly as the carriage was lifted and moved to an unknown location. Useless failures is what you are. No pony comes back from exile, regardless of reason. Can't even pass your goddamn test. You three make me sick. Scootaloo jumped up from her seat, lifted herself into the air with her wings, and dove legs first at Boss. You shut the hell up about us. You have no right to treat others like this. Boss raised a hoof and backhanded Scootaloo out of the air onto the floor. I can treat you however I want. You hardly classify as ponies to Cloudsdale, or any of Equestria for that matter. Now you sit the fuck down and shut up until you get to your destination. Where are we being taken anyways? Not like we could tell anyone now. And I'm sure, as the deliverers, you guys should know. Orion cautiously reasoned. Hell if I know. We hand this carriage off to ponies in suits and we get a bag full of coins to keep quiet about the whole thing. That's how it's always been. For 1,000 years. The three fillies huddled together again, scared of the unknown. They kept quiet as they waited through the unbearable trip, all lost in their own thoughts. Friends, family, loved ones, and pets. All will never see them again, and some would never find out why. An hour passed, and then another. Finally, the uncomfortable quiet was broken by a sudden lurch as the carriage stopped in its flight. Boss? Boss smiled. There's my stop. You ponies play nice now. Have fun in wherever the hell you're sent to. The carriage door shuffled open, and Boss hopped out with a gust of cold wind, and it was dark outside, with hardly any light to see at all. Scootaloo stared outside and noticed another figure staring in. It was dressed in black suit. It was tail dyed in unnatural black that never occurred in nature. Its face was covered by a dark, loose-fitting mask, concealing its mane. All that was visible were rose-colored eyes, staring indifferently at those three ponies. Inside, they stopped on Scootaloo momentarily, unrecognizing, but she stared back a second. The dark pony slammed the door shut, and the carriage took off once again. At least we can talk now, Aurora whispered in the dark, but they had nothing to talk about. The Rainbow Factory. Read to you by Open Chest. Inspired by Wooden Toasters, Rainbow Factory. Written by Aurora Dawn. Three disordered foes blinked their eyes, awake, having all resolved to conceive energy for whatever came next. With a loud scraping noise, the doors shook and then swung open. Several more ponies, obscured by masks and suits, were moving around the area. Scootaloo blinked against the light from what she was seeing. They were in the Cloud building. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed more details. Several of the blackened ponies were rushing around, some holding clipboards, and some carrying briefcases and other important-looking items on their backs. The complex was full of mercenary signs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and a loud whir ran in the background, occasionally joined with other industrial sounds, such as crashes and alarms. Scootalu gasped. This place, the architecture, it's all so familiar. I think we're in the leather factory. Orion frowned. That can't be right. We were traveling for way too long. We've got to be far away from Equestria now, not to mention the city. Actually, Scootalu might be right, Aurora mused. I noticed it was maybe the same amount of time from when when we left the Coliseum to the place the carriage driver swapped, that it was from the swap to here, but I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Welcome, mules, a large and powerful voice commanded several of the suited ponies. Several of the suited ponies moved to make way for a deep, dark red Pegasus dressed in a white lab coat. You degenerates are probably wondering where you are. You are. Stupid fillies, you're in Cloudsdale. The Reinbow facility, to be correct. Allow me to show you around. What's going on here? Do you expect to use us as slaves? Because I'd rather be deported. Thanks, Scootalu yelled. Orion and Aurora got off their seats and stood behind Scootalu, nodding in agreement. Like you failures have a choice. You'll be here for the rest of your lives. Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I am Dr. Atmosphere. My degree isn't a medical one, I shall reassure you, in case you're picturing some dreadful surgery going on behind the scenes. No. Strange how so many worthless Pegasus get the idea. No. My degree is in engineering. I'm one of the 4 cults in this facility. I'm not sure what... I'm sure you've all had a tour of the lore factory. Nope. The 3 ponies nodded slowly, unsure of what was going on. Excellent! Who could tell me where the tour begins? Orion spoke up first. Where the spectre comes from upstairs and is mixed. Very good. What a pity you are utterly useless to the flock. You could have been a smart one. Dr. Atmosphere smiled sadistically and patted Orion on the head. But today, we're on the upper floor. Please follow me and don't get too far behind, or one of my helpers will be forced to encourage you. With that, he winked at the student ponies with nods. 3 of them at the rear end of the leaned forward and jabbed each of the Pegasus with tasers, shocking them to the ground. Dr. Atmosphere whinnied in laughter as they all yelped and fell and continued into a soft chuckle as they all stood up again. Scootalu blinked more tears from her eyes and shook herself again, trying to lose the tingling in her nerves. She turned and quickly looked at each of the suited ponies, catching each of them in the eye when she could. None of them were the rose-eyed pony from the carriage. Begrudgingly, she started walking behind the red engineer. You simply must be careful in this department, Dr. Atmosphere began in a tone not unlike the many tour guides in the lower floors. There's plenty of nooks and crannies and vents and vats one could fall into. One must be careful not to hurt themselves. After all, you're all hopeless as it is. Any more so, even we couldn't use you. He glanced behind himself maliciously as the 3 foes frowned in insult. They were walking down a series of halls with vibrating machines and assembled lines lining in the way, occasionally ducking under low-hanging wires or carefully stepping over steamed pipes. As they walked through, the building became cooler and cooler. Only three were watching, sensing, looking for any way out. They couldn't see any. Now let me tell you a story. Cloudsdale is where the weather is made. Without us, the rest of Equestria would starve, freeze, drown, and generally not be a very happy place. That gives us a special honor, one that could not be tainted by incompetent fools like you. How could the world look up at us and trust a fifth Pegasi like you? We're floating around wearing the Cloudsdale name. No. We needed to do something with all of you. And then we got a delicious idea. One day, over 1,000 years ago, those were some smart ponies back then, I'll say. You don't find too many of them these days. But I digress. Here now, through these doors, quickly. Now before more encouragement is supplied, Dr. Atmosphere opened a heavy-looking door in the cramped corridor and offered a hoof inside. Scootalu stared up at him. He glanced at a suited pony. Scootalu and the others walked inside as he laughed again. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful lives. And with that, he slammed the door closed. They all turned and looked at the big room they had been led to. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room there were 6 square vats, each one nearly full of the individual spectra. Above them was a particular-looking machine from a central stack. 6 hoses broke off and led above each of the individual vats. At the top of the stack was a single opening, red with rust, despite the rest of the machine to be shiny and clean. Even further above, that was just a fairly complex-looking object with chains and gears hanging off beams, and pipes lucidly running even higher than the whole machine was. A length of the scaffolding with doors on either side leaning out of the room. Down on the floor, a small collection of defeated crying ponies sat, chattered quietly. Those suits, those are from the other flight school across town, Aurora informed, sounding shocked. And those other ponies sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went on once with Levitating Anchor's private school. I remember them from that trip. So this is where all the failures go. Not deported, but forced to work forever. Orion sobbed quietly, in exchange for helping someone he had doomed himself and his good friend for a life of servitude. Scootalu reached a reassuring wink. And lifted his chin. She smiled at him, understanding his depression. At least we don't have to go through it alone, she cooed softly. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the group of ex-students. One pony from an unidentified school took off, headed towards one of the doors on the scaffolding. Immediately, 2 suited ponies launched at record speed and both clipped the flyaway with their tasers. The ponies spasmed in air and then dropped like a stone, with an audible crack as he landed in a violent burst of twitching. All of the other ponies walked back, staring horrified at their friend they had watched, hopefully for a long time. He didn't move. Some cried softly. Most others turned away, too far confused to feel any more emotions. I guess that option's out, Aurora said to no one in particular. But you can't fly right now anyways, Orian questioned. That medic guy, Patches or whatever he was called, he popped my wings back into their joints and bandaged up where my skin tore. I won't be winning any races, but I can fly again. They slowly walked forward and joined the group of ponies, looking at each other. They walked forwards and joined the group of ponies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow. Eyes front and center, you inept mules! One of the suited ponies shouted after the previous display. No one challenged that order and stared at the scaffolding, just as one of the doors opened. A few official-looking Pegasi walked in on the scaffolding and turned to look down on the group with disgust. One of them stood onto a small podium set up in the center and began speaking loudly and clearly. By now you all clearly determined that you are not going into exile. There is no deportation. There never was. You are in the factory. You never leave the factory. And while you may be called useless, that's also not entirely true. You are worthless as a flock, as a pony, but you still have purpose. Purpose to all ponies in this land, far and wide. You get to help us make rainbows. Beautiful, magical rainbows. Doesn't that excite you? The mysterious announcer grinned aesthetically, taking in all disgusted looks from each foal on the floor below him. I thought so, he chuckled. It is just such an honor, you know. It leaves every pony astounded, with the task speechless too. Now, do we have any volunteers? Again, every pony below glared with hate. One brave pony, a light pink one from levitating anchors, walked forward a few steps, then yelled, How could you ever get away with this? How could Celestia or even Luna know about this and tolerate it? It's slavery. It's torture. I think you'll find it's more than that. A second official pony walked out the shadows and up to the podium. The pony was in a suit and masked. The first pony walked off the podium and allowed the second to talk. Scootalu noticed that it was the rose-eyed pony from before. She watched more intently now. The voice was familiar. 1,000 years ago, when Celestia banished Luna from Equestria and sent her to the moon, she was charged with 3 tasks. She was ritually in charge of raising the sun and showering the land with rainbows. But with the moon being an additional task, she had to hand down the responsibility of the rainbows. Celestia entrusted the Pegasi of Cloudsail to make the rainbows for them. From then on, for the first dozen years, we were given powerful unicorns to help create spectra. Spectra is pure pigment, pure color. Everything is full of spectra, but you can't just harvest it. You can never separate color from an object. So it was made artificially with magic. The masked pony never took off her eyes off that brave pink one. That is until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way to extract pigment. And it was so beautiful, even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be right. What did those horrible people do? The pink Pegasus screamed, growling, angrier by the minute. The mysterious pony whipped off her mask. unveiling more than her rose eyes. Her skin was a light cyan, and her mane was a gorgeous rainbow. Several of the fillies gasped. Scootalu's knees weakened as it hit her. It was Rainbow Dash. Scootalu's thoughts raced through her mind, and the room started spinning. It couldn't be. An evil twin, maybe? Perhaps some neglected sister. Rainbow Dash couldn't be this evil. She was her friend, her mentor, her only family, even if not by blood. How? How was all she could think? It had to be live ponies. Only in ponies where magic and spectra ran freely together. Rainbow Dash threw her head back and laughed manically. Only then could the spectra be separated. And it was such a beautiful idea. Such a wonderfully horrible idea. It worked so well. We could create extra pony and more rainbows of better quality with real spectra. And it'd finally give us a way to prevent Cloudsdale from being tainted with all those horrible Pegasus that couldn't fly. The machine, Mom. Scootalu couldn't take it. While all the other ponies were exclaiming their disgust and fear, running and screaming for where they came in, backing off as student ponies surrounded them and herded them back into the center of the floor. Scootalu couldn't take it anymore. I thought you loved me, she wailed, cutting Rainbow Dash's laughter short. Huh? She turned and noticed the amber-orange Pegasus. I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me? I thought you cared for me. After all the help, all my life you've treated me like a little sister. And I treated you like my big sister. You were my big sister to me. You were the only family I ever had, and you knew it! Tears were pouring down her face now, obscuring her vision again. Her throat hurt from crying and shouting, but she couldn't stop. After everything, you're just gonna let me die? I tried so hard for you. She stared at the floor for a moment. Everyone was silent. Then Scootalu looked up slowly, and while she couldn't see for the sadness in her eyes, she looked straight at Rainbow Dash. Straight into those rosy eyes, past them, and deep into Rainbow Dash herself. I thought you loved me. Rainbow Dash returned the look. Her eyes revealed no emotion, no love, no care, only apathy. Slowly, however, they glared at Scootalu. Pure seething hate erupted from Rainbow Dash's mouth as she screamed in return. I did love you! I tried so hard for you! I taught you everything I knew. It helped you would pass your test. You had it in you, kid. I knew what they did here. Ever since I reported that sonic rainboom, and they approached me. They wanted to find more ways to make spectra. They thought if I was capable of making rainbows, I could help them make its components. Well, they couldn't. But I learned a lot about this place. I'm the manager here, you know? I worked my way up. In secret. Pretending to only be weather control. How do you think I could afford that massive house over in Ponyville? How do you... She trailed, shaking her head, remembering her anger suddenly. I tried, alright? That's it. It was up to you. You saved yourself. You didn't just fail yourself. You didn't just fail me. You didn't just fail Cloudsdale. You failed me. And that's the worst thing you could have done. You aren't just dead to Cloudsdale now. You're dead to me. The room tilted as Scootalu tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke as she was totally unable to focus on anything. She stumbled slightly until Orion held open a wing, and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this and yelled with more fury. You can't have happiness. You ruined me. Now I'll ruin you. Workers! The brown one! There! Him first! No! Scootalu, Orion, and Aurora all jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two out to the side. He tried to leap out of the way to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked at him. The hoof connected to his shoulder, and Orion collapsed with a shout. Get back! Get back! More suits yelled at Aurora and Scootalu as they dragged the whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine at the back started humming to life, and the assembly of the chains lifted off the top and moved towards the floor. Everyone noticed there were shackles now, and the suits clasped Orion into them. Braving a look up, he turned to Scootalu. Don't worry, Scoots. I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Orion. Scootalu gasped. I love you too. With that, the chains pulled tight and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up to the gears. The chains grew taut and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down. We find the machine works better if the ribs are broken, she explained apathetically, as the chains spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echo pops and shattered noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his side, and his yells faded to a slow, quiet rattle of breaths. The chain untwisted, and the shackles opened, dropping the shattered pony into the single opening. Scootalu watched in horror, her brain overcome with what was happening. Detached from all emotion, she noticed that the top of the machine wasn't rusty. It was blood. Blood, just like that was being tossed up from the mangled remains of Orion, as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine, finishing with one lone hoof directed straight up, and then nothing was left. As the hoses over the green and red vats of spectra started spewing their brilliant colors, Scootalu's vision started to fade, and the last thing she noticed was Aurora's concerned, broken voice saying her name. As Scootalu flopped to the side, Scootalu, get up! Get up now, hurry! Scootalu, wake up! Wake up! Scootalu shook her head briefly, wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back, and she jumped to her feet. Aurora was shaking her fright into her face. The suits were starting to approach the two now, tasers and shackles up and ready. Scootalu, they're coming for us. What do we do? Scootalu looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked, except for one on the scaffolding. The suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing in order to prevent the fillies from freaking out. Fear was their only tool. Scootalu spun around, looking for an exit. There was only one. She realized. I have a plan, she whispered to Aurora. What's that? Clear, fly, fall, complete. Aurora nodded in understanding. Her eyes widened, and she repeated louder, so the other frightened fillies could hear. Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it. One. Scootalu started counting. 2, Aurora squeaked as she backed into Scootalu. The suits were mere feet away now. 3, the collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could actually fly took off The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure of where to go. There was too much confusion. A few of the faster-thinking ones took off as well, chasers at the ready, aiming at the closer Pegasus they could take. Step 1, Scootalu screamed. Clear! With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. Hooves connected with their heads, and while some of the students fell lifeless to the floor, the majority of the cuslet were the suited ponies. Scootalu and Aurora landed on the scaffolding right by the door and reached to open it. It was locked. Oh God, what do we do now? Aurora cried. We're still unclear, she shouted. Turning around and bucking the door, Aurora followed her, focusing the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be Rainbow Dash on the other side of the scaffolding. Recovered from her individual shock of the reborn and noticing Scootalu pounding on the door. Kill her! She screamed at the other important-looking ponies. Kill her! She started to gallop towards the fillies, forgetting her wings momentarily. Scootalu closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It started to creak and splinter. And any second now, she thought Rainbow Dash will be here. It's all over. I'm doomed. She would have cried, but there were no more tears left. But nothing came to. The door started to split from its frame, now leaning inward. It wouldn't be long until it was open. She opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding. All the remaining ponies were there, pressing together and holding the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies back. They wouldn't last long, however. Even as Scootalu watched, twitching and yelping ponies were falling to the floor below. Some even landed on the great maw of the spectrum machine. The pink pony from Levitating Anchors was there, and she turned to Scootalu and Aurora just as the door blew back into the hall behind. Fly! The pink pony determined with pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was cut short as the pile of Pegasus blew apart, with Rainbow Dash standing engaged in the open door. She was on her two back hooves, her front two cooling in the air, as a small gash down her side leaked red, and her multicolored mane was torn in a patch. An utterly howl passed her lip, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that was left. Come on, Aurora, Scootalu pleaded as she spun around. We've got to fly if we're going to live. I can't do that. It's too much. I haven't healed. Aurora looked at Scootalu with wide open eyes. You go, Scootalu. Tell everyone what happens here. Let them know. She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now, as Rainbow Dash bloodlust tore them to pieces. Her blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping, as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more Cloudsdale could take a shortage of rainbows in another few months. There would be more classes, more failures. But for now, all she knew is that Scootalu had to die violently if possible. Decades of working at the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. She was the only one allowed out in the public, and keeping the horrible secret with her since childhood had led to psychological problems no amount of therapy could cure. Scootalu was her last link to on sanity, and her failure had deleted that. There was no logic in her mind anymore. Anymore. No care, no capacity for compassion, only hate. Pure, constructed, and evil hatred filled the gap for love. Her love for Scootalu had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more. Only this monster remained. I hardly knew you, Aurora, Scootalu cooed softly into the yellow Pegasus beside her. I'm sorry I never knew you until all of this. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. And I'm sorry we had to part like this. She sniffled. She had found more tears. Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting, or a reason, Scootalu. Now you heard the other pony. Fly, Scootalu, fly. Goodbye. Goodbye, Aurora. With that, Scootalu levitated and spun around, looked into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and launched down the cramped corridor. She then had no idea where she was going, but any chance at freedom was one she was willing to take. Aurora blinked a couple of times. Standing in front of her, Rainbow Dash would have had at least one obstacle in her way to Scootalu. The blue pony tossed the last of the other students over to the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora. How cute! You think you, a useless broken pile of manure, can possibly stand in my way? You really make me laugh. None of you can compete with the awesome power I have. Love can overcome all evils in this world. Aurora straightened herself in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Dash, blaring her entry down the corridor beyond. Well then, bitch, let's see if love can overcome this one. And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and pulled, tearing it off completely. Aurora collapsed on her wings, grinding her teeth in horrible pain. But she didn't scream. She wouldn't give in to that. She wouldn't give in to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash grabbed her other wing and dragged her, kicking and moaning, down to the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the levitating wing, laughing quietly to herself as the look of intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her over the top of the machine with a squeak of laughter. She jerked at one wing in her hoof. It too disconnected and fell from the now convulsing Pegasus, and Aurora fell. She landed head first. The door on the scaffolding closed with a gust of wind, just as the machine began pumping out the brightest greens and yellows it had ever produced, and there was no one around to see it. Scootalu glanced backwards momentarily, and her heart pounding. The noise of the constant thump, thump, thump drowned out any other sound in her head, her ears throbbing along with it. The corridor was just like the one, with dozens of obstacles jutting out at random intervals. Standing behind her, maybe 500 meters now, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along herself. Both Pegasi were completely straight. Hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count, one trying to escape, the other to capture. Scootalu looked forward again, focusing on what lay ahead of her. That's all that matters, she thought. What's ahead of me? There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus For the second time in as many days, a flood of instinct overtook Scootalu, and despite the terror she felt in her body, the sorrow that had surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries melted away, and even the thought of the flying encased her very being. Down under wires and pipes, she ducked up and around various workers whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as the raging pony behind collided with them, her body doing the flying. Scootalu's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at any possible speeds, zipped up and down countless sets of stairs, trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She completed every nook and cranny she passed, briefly considering hiding. She struck the idea down. As insane as Rainbow Dash may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spot of Scootalu may be. But there, ahead of her, Scootalu found a solution. A garbage vent of some kind, sticking out from the wall to the floor below. Momentarily, she gave thought to where it might lead. Whether out of the factory into some incinerator, she couldn't tell, but it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance behind her to make sure the unstoppable mare was far away enough. Rainbow Dash was paying no attention to any hazards as she sought her prey, tearing through electric wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time. But the collisions had slowed her down enough to give Scootalu a chance. She slammed to a sudden halt over the open vent, hoping for her life. "Fall," she muttered, closing her eyes, and her wings reduced the urge to start flapping. Immediately, she counted silently to herself as Scootalu rushed past her closed eyes, hoping for the best of where the vent had laid. 1, 2, 3. She opened her eyes and her wings and looked up, hovering. Rainbow Dash was above, looking down into the vent. Her eyes were buggy, and she twitched her hooves. Her hooves pounded on the edge of the vent. She was too late to follow the filly, having barely made it herself. But then the anger of her face vanished, only to be replaced by a malicious grin. She started laughing again, the cackle echoing down the vent and reverberating in Scootalu's mind. "You moron! You never did have a good sense of direction," she teased. Laughing again, Scootalu finally looked down, getting her bearings. "Oh no!" she squealed. She was in the theater room again. Only by now, it was full of suited ponies circling her. Their masked faces seemed to be grinning at her as Rainbow Dash shouted orders down the vent. "Don't let her die! I must do it! Subdue her! Catch her!" She whinnied in glorious victory as Suits shot Scootalu with taser gun, and as her limp body began to fall from the air, caught her and brought her to the floor. Scootalu blacked out momentarily as the electricity passed through her, but she came to lying on the gold cloud floor, metal shackles preventing her from moving. She struggled to get free. She could hardly shake the chains lifted her lightly, bringing her small body eye to eye with the Pegasus in front of her. The pony was a deep blood red, glistening, artificial light of the factory. Her mane had small spots of glorious colors of the rainbow, but was mostly same red color as her coat of fur. Chunks of skin were missing from small spots, and her hair was ripped in some places, bald patches of skins in others. The only clue Scootalu had as to who this used to be were those rose irises focused on her. Any final words, you miserable, worthless, horrible fool? Scootalu brought her chin high, still demanding even the tiniest fraction of dignity. You have beautiful eyes.
Now a rainbow's tale isn't quite as nice as the story we knew of sugar and spice. But a rainbow's easy once you get